we have the consultant on board. So let me go ahead and start the meeting. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the first redistricting outreach meeting. My apologies for the technical difficulties that we experienced, but hopefully people are getting on that were hoping to join. I just want to remind you that our meeting is being recorded and it will be posted to our website. It will form part of the official record for our redistricting project. Again, welcome. My name is Michelle Hapner. I'm with the County Administrator's Office. I'm the project manager for the county, and I also staff the Redistricting Advisory Committee, which is a 15-member committee that is appointed by the Board of Supervisors to assist them in conducting some community outreach. These are the advisory committee members, and they are on the call tonight listening to your comments, and feedback will be, and they will be reporting the feedback that they receive to the board in late December. So I'm going to start real quick and share, set up, Sophia to share her screen. So let me just see. I have just made her a host. So she should be able to share her screen right now.
Okay, perfect. I'm doing that. Let's see. Share. Great. Can you all see the presentation?
We can.
Perfect.
Okay. So did you have the information that I put forward, Sophia?
Yes, I do.
Okay,
I have that at the beginning of the presentation.
Okay, so would you mind going to the advisory committee members? Okay, so this is the information that I wanted you to see. This is the advisory committee members that the board has appointed for each district. Unfortunately, we do have 2 vacancies right now, and I know the 2 districts are looking for people to fill those. Okay, so next slide, please. Okay, so I also wanted to acknowledge that we do have an internal staff team that is assisting with this project. I'm not going to introduce everyone that's on that team, but I did want to note that we have a large team that is intricately involved in this. A lot of IT expertise that will be helping with the mapping process. Next slide, please. So in addition to the county staff, Solano County has contracted with Redistricting Partners, a consulting firm specializing in this type of work, to help us navigate the new requirements for the redistricting cycle. On this slide are the consultants that are working on our project and will help you navigate this maze to provide input into Solano's redistricting process. All right, so next slide, please. This meeting is focused on District 2. However, I wanted to make sure you knew that anyone in any district is welcome to provide feedback at this meeting or any other future meetings. I would like to invite Supervisor Monica Brown from District 2 to say a few words before we get started with the overview of redistricting. Supervisor?
Thanks. Yeah, thanks, Michelle. So I want to thank everybody for attending the District 2 outreach meeting about redistricting. I know, repeating myself, my name is Monica Brown and I'm your District 2 supervisor. The meetings of the redistricting committee are our opportunity to hear from the public about what the lines should look like, you know. Please, I would like everybody, encourage all of your friends to use the resources and learn about what it is that we're talking about tonight. And I know we'll probably talk about the website and you know, you don't have to necessarily be here, but please put information on the website. We want to have as much community input as possible. That's why we're going through this. Your voice matters, and participating in redistricting is how you make your voice heard. And thank you very much for your time and your patience with technology, which we all know is not always our friend. Thanks, Michelle.
All right, thank you, Supervisor. So at this point, I'd like to introduce you to Sophie Garcia. She's the Outreach Director with Redistricting Partners, who will going over everything and that you'll need to know to be part of this process. So Sophia, it's all yours.
Great, thank you, Michelle, and thank you everyone here at Solano. Today, we'll be giving this presentation, and we'll be giving this exact presentation at every community outreach hearing to ensure that everyone has some basics of redistricting, they know the process, they get to see the map tool, and they really learn about communities of interest so that you all can give your testimony in various ways. So yeah, today we'll be going over this agenda. So we're going to start with basic of what is redistricting. This is a process that occurs every 10 years after the release of the US Census. Some of the most well-known redistricting processes that happen are our congressional and state legislative districts. But local governments must also go through this process. Normally, the data would have been released in March, but we are not in normal times. So we are going to be drawing our maps close to September. And right now, we can still get those communities of interest testimony. But so Solano County must go through this process, and it is, we're looking at equal population, but also we're looking to empower local communities and preserving voting rights as well for redistricting. The Redistricting Advisory Committee, Michelle had that wonderful slide outlining the 15-member committee, and the Redistricting Advisory Committee, or RAC 21, is here to assist in conducting community outreach to identify the communities of interest countywide and within their respective districts. Outreach efforts between now and when the 2020 census data is released in the fall will be here to allow the board sufficient opportunity to conduct public hearings to consider potential district map options before December 15th, 2021, which is the deadline for map approval. We have the additional slide, have it here again, of your RAC commission, your commissioners and the leads for each district. And redistricting is more of an art than a science. And there's also a number of criteria that the Board of Supervisors will have to keep at the forefront of their head when they are considering maps. And there's a lot of different criteria that must be considered. The first one is relatively equal size. And when we talk about equal size, we're talking about people, not citizens. So any person that was counted in the 2020 census count, that's the folks that we're thinking about. This is a really important piece because it's a big reason why we redistrict after the census, to sort of see where population shifts have happened, where growth has happened, so that we have a relatively equal number of people in each district at the end of the cycle. We have contiguous, which is that districts shouldn't hop or jump. So making sure that the lines are still touching and that we're not jumping over boundaries. Maintaining communities of interest is the big portion why we're here tonight, and we'll go into that further in the presentation. Another criteria is to follow city, county, local government lines, lines that folks are familiar with. There's school district lines, community college district lines. So those are things that the Board of Supervisors can consider. And the last one is keeping districts compact. And that is there's two ways to think about that. One is appearance and the other was in function. So a district may appear compact, but maybe it's going to take 10 minutes to get to the other side of the freeway. So in a function, that might not be as compact. So that's just a brief overview, and we go into these concepts a lot further in the Redistricting 101 presentation, which we gave earlier. But let's dive further into communities of interest after this slide. So there's a new law that passed in 2018 that counties and cities must look at. There's additional criteria, and it's known as the Fair Maps Act. And under the Fair Maps Act, the Board of Supervisors of Solano County cannot consider incumbent candidates when they're drawing their district lines. You can't draw district lines to advantage or disadvantage a political party. They must hold a minimum of set hearings to encourage public engagement, and that's one of the hearings that's going on today. And there's also a website which is linked at the end of this presentation that the county must hold and maintain for 10 years. So, so that commissioners in 2030 can have all that information. All of the links to the hearings, the Zoom links are on there, and that is the website that must be maintained. And it's a wonderful website. We were able to get the link to this Zoom link when we used the website. So to go into a little bit more of communities of interest. So redistricting and communities of interest is a little bit of a difficult concept to grasp your head around. But we just want to remind everyone on the call and the public that we know that you all are experts in your community. You know where the parts of the county that have great dog parks or sidewalks or bike lanes, you know where the best taco places or place to get the food that you like. And so this is a concept where we are talking about it, but in a redistricting way. So communities of interest can include ethnic and language minorities and other groups. Some that are covered by the Voting Rights Act are Latinos, Asians, African Americans, and Native Americans. And while race is a community of interest, it cannot be a predominant factor in drawing district boundaries. If there is a Voting Rights Act violation, then it can be the predominant factor, but right now, race can be considered, but it can't be the main reason why the districts are drawn. So some additional examples to think about for communities of interest are neighborhood groups. It could be your area around your high school or your junior high area. It could be different age populations, so students or senior citizens. There could be the downtown or rural populations, agriculture, or homeowners and renters. But again, to further help folks kind of grasp this concept of communities of interest, there's 3 critical questions to think about when you're defining your community. The first one is, does your community have a shared culture, characteristic, or bond? So what are the similarities that define your community? Is the community geographic in nature? So can your community be mapped? At the end of the day, redistricting is about mapping. The Board of Supervisors will have a final map that will become the final boundary lines in 2015. So thinking about what is the geography of your community. And then the third one is to describe the community's relationship with the jurisdiction and how it is affected by the policy decisions made by elected officials. So in this regard, it's what's your community's relationship to the Board of Supervisors of Solano County? This is an example we love to give to sort of, again, help people think through this concept. And we know that everyone has different facets of who they are. I yes, work for redistricting partners, but I have other hobbies and things that I like to do. And one of the things is I'm a dog mom. I have a big black Labradoodle, and I live in Bakersfield, California, and it's very hot here. And one of the things that are important to me as a dog pet parent are dog parks that are well lit, that are safe, places where I can congregate and where he can be social. And we have a community here. There's a dog park about 10 minutes away. It's one of the ones that we love to go to. There's some young trees there and lights. And the reason why I'm telling you all about this is we are a community that had a concern. Before COVID, there wasn't a water fountain at that particular dog park. And so what we all had to do is we had to bring jugs of water. We had to bring our own water bowls because it gets very hot. All the dogs run around. And so we are a community of interest. We have a geographic nature around this park. And the relationship to the jurisdiction would be our county or city. It wouldn't make sense if I were to come with all my dark park friends to the community college district redistricting. If I went up and said, I'm a dog mom, I would like for you to put in a water fountain, that wouldn't make sense because the college district doesn't deal with parks and recreation. So this is an example of thinking through what are the communities that we all belong to, what's the geography, but again, that third question is, what is your relationship? What is your community's relationship with the Board of Supervisors? So you know, folks on here could have your dog community as a community of interest, and you could talk to your supervisors if you'd like, but that's just a fun thought exercise. Now to go for map submissions, the online map submissions will be available in the coming months. We're working on that to make the your district R site available. And right now you can create your communities of interest maps from now until the end of the process. And then you can also create the district plans when the 2020 census data is released. And so we have the district R link here. Michelle, would you like me to go through this now or at the end of the presentation? I can do it there.
I think it would probably be good at the end. I think let's get through the most of the education stuff, and then maybe that could be a good way to segue into some of the input. Okay,
perfect. So this right now, we are working again on the specific Solano County site, but you can go to districtr.org/California and it'll take you there. We're working on doing a tutorial, but we'll do a mapping tutorial after this presentation. Another way that you can submit your communities of interest is through forms. So there's the form that goes through those three questions that we talked about earlier. You can, I believe the form is on the website that you can submit there, and paper copies could also be made available if you would like that. Another way to draw your communities of interest is a placemat that are laminated, and again you can I think pick those up soon and you can draw on them, and then we'll get a picture of that. So we want to make sure that there's a wide variety of ways that the public can testify, give their communities of interest, whether they want to use the online platform, the form, or this paper map. And this is the second outreach hearing that is occurring, and as you can see, there's a lot of them. And so there's a lot of opportunity for everyone in the county to know about the different ways that they can submit their communities of interest form. And if you want to find out more information, you can visit the Solano County website, redistricting.solanocounty.com. That's it. And I can stop sharing my screen. And then when you guys are ready, we can go through that District R tutorial.
So were you going to share your screen to do that, Sophia?
Yes, I can do that. Okay. Do you guys see my screen again? Perfect. So this is the, if you go to districtr.org/California, right now, this is the way that you can draw your community of interest tool. And you're going to click on the button Draw Communities. And we're going to go to California, identify a community built out of block groups. And again, this is just an example, and we're working on the Solano County specific one to get up. And for now, you're going to zoom in to Solano County. The state is really big. I'll zoom in there. And right now, just for this tutorial, we're just going to zoom in closer to this area. So once you kind of zoomed into the setting that you would want, you see that there is this toolbar on the right, and there's a couple of things that we can do. This little hand tool lets you move the map up and down. You can zoom out, you can zoom out or zoom in. And then to draw your communities of interest, you can click, there's two ways. You can click on this little paintbrush here, and you can make your paintbrush really big so you can see that we're grabbing a lot of block groups, or if you just want to grab a couple, then we can do one. So we'll just click a couple of areas, and then it's shaded, and we can name that specific communities of interest. So we'll name it Valley Vista. And you can add information into this so that the commission and the board can know a little bit more about why you're drawing that particular communities of interest. And if you'd like to draw a second communities of interest or additional ones, you just click the add button, and we'll zoom over here. And you do the same function where I'm going to make my brush size a little bit bigger, grab a couple of block groups. If you'd like to do a specific point, then there's that function as well, where you're going to click on new important places. And this one will allow you to just click on a particular point. And we can name this, this area as well, add description. So if you would like to do a larger area or just click on particular points of interest, you can do that. If you're not happy with what you've drawn, there is the erase tool. You can erase some of these areas. And then to the data layers and the evaluation, they give you a lot of information here, but really are become more useful when you're drawing the full district plan, but you can see how your particular communities of interest fare for the different race populations, and then for evaluation as well. But again, this becomes a little bit more useful when you're drawing the full district plan. When you would like to save your map plan, you go to the save button, and then you can put for the event code, like type in Solano County. You can place your name there if you would like. And then it will tag your map and it is saved. If you would like to share your map with other people in the community or email your map, you want to copy your specific URL code right here, and then you can share that or go back and edit it if you would like. So it's a pretty intuitive tool. I know that a lot of folks, we've been online for the past year. So this one is District R. So that's basically it for the tutorial.
Okay, so I wanted to add also to what Sophia was talking about is while that tool will be available to everyone, if you're not comfortable drawing maps, we will provide maps that you can download and you can print out, draw on paper, and you can submit those. You can scan them back and email them to us. You can mail them to us. There will be a myriad of ways for you to get information to us to ensure that your that your input is included as part of this process. So did we want to move on to the next section, Kimmy?
Sure. So if anyone has questions that we can answer, I would love for you to raise your hand, which you can do in the reactions piece at the bottom of your screen. There should be a bar down here. So if you have any questions, if you could raise your hand, and then we can go through and answer those, or if you have any comments. And this would be a fantastic opportunity if you did want to discuss your community of interest You can certainly do that here, or you can send the feedback to Michelle via the website link that Sophia had up earlier. Okay. Ms. Diaz?
Yes, I just want to tell everybody how important it is for everyone to participate. When we had the district elections in Vallejo, we were preparing for this. This was so important. We had, I think it was 26 maps that were turned in. And the map that that myself with 4 other women, 4 other residents of Vallejo, put together was just amazing. We started off not knowing what we were doing, to be honest with you. We went ahead and printed out a very large paper map, actually 2 of them, and we laminated them. So we did it the old school way. So I was laughing as you were describing what options were there, because the old school sometimes does work. We had these humongous, maps, and there was 5 of us who would get together, and there was rules that we had to follow, such as, not breaking, census tracts, that was very important. Then we started looking at schools in Vallejo and making sure that we had schools in each district. For us, it was very important that South Vallejo and North Vallejo had representation, because they never had been represented. Most of the city council members in Vallejo, including myself, live in East Vallejo, up on the hills, away from the waterfront and the downtown. And it's sad that not everybody had been represented. I mentioned earlier that I'm the first council member that's, I am Latina, I'm Mexican origin, and it only took about 160 years for us to have Latina representation. We'd never had Latino representation. So districts are a good thing, because it's a smaller segment. They get to know you better, they meaning your constituents. It doesn't take an arm and a leg, to run a campaign. It's more doable, as far as walking and knocking on doors and getting to know people. So everything about it is a wonderful thing. Now, what I particularly like, and I'm in District 2 with my supervisor, who I really like, because she's always open to listening to us, and that's why I said yes, to be on this committee. But keep in mind that you might not agree with everybody, but it's important to voice your concerns. And it's important that the county is divided up in a way where everybody's represented. And I'm going to say this because this is just the way I am. Sometimes it's not just repeatedly, voting for the same person and the same person. It's voting for people that are going to really represent everyone. So if we've been represented, that's a great thing, but I'm going to tell you that not everybody has. Not everybody has access to the county supervisors, and not all supervisors make an effort to reach out to their constituents. So that's why this is important. This is very, very important. And let me see what else. I'd make a couple of notes. I guess I'll speak later on, but I just wanted to tell you what we did. And now we're in the process of doing another redistricting. It's a shame that we don't have the census count until we're halfway through this, but you have to do what you have to do. So that's a little story from Vallejo. It worked for us, old school way. I think now we're going to do it online, but there's no shame in getting the paper out and drawing them out, because our goal was to keep about 19,500 people in each district, and it was just easier because when you blow up that sheet, the numbers of each census tract is there, and you're able to just subtract and do it in a way that all of us could work together instead of just one person, or everybody being in front of a screen. That's all I have to say right now. Thanks.
Well, thank you. I don't see anyone else raising their hand. I did want to note that, you don't have to provide input today. I know it's a lot to think about. There will be other opportunities. You're welcome to join any of the future meetings. You're also welcome to provide your input through our website. On the website, there is, under the Get Involved tab, there is an icon that says a community of interest form. That form lays out the information that we need for a community of interest to be considered. So I would urge you to go look at that form, see what the questions are as you're thinking about what your communities of interest would be that you're interested in submitting. And also please share the the website with other community members. There is a share button at the bottom of the website. You can share it via social media. There's a whole bunch of ways to get hold of me as well. I'm happy to answer any questions that the community has. The best way to reach me is at redistricting@solanocounty.com. It's the one-stop email that we're using to get to the community, and feel free to use that email to hand out to community members if they're interested in this process. So, and then I wanted to give the opportunity to any of the other redistricting advisory committee members if you would like to say something, or if you had any questions or wise words as we move forward with this.
Yes, I'll say something. Just wanted to thank everybody. Just echo what Mina says. This is really very important. Work that everybody's doing, and just wanted to thank everybody for taking the time to come out and talk to us, or to listen to the presentation, and to think about your communities of interest, and how we can draw lines that adequately represent everybody. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm not seeing any more hands raised. Is there, oh, Sean, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I look forward to seeing everybody's communities of interest, visually, and hearing more about it through the other means that Michelle outlined, as far as the different ways that we can submit our communities of interest. So just wanted to say thanks, everybody. Looking forward to it.
All right, thank you, Sean. To piggyback on that, I did want to let you know that any information that we receive for these communities of interest or maps going forward, those are all going to be made public on the website, so everyone will be able to see them. We're trying to make this as transparent as possible process, so you will be able to have access to other people's maps, and they'll be able to see what you submit. Okay, I'm not seeing any more. Did you have any closing remarks, Supervisor Brown?
No, I'm just, I not necessarily that I work with Mina, but I went to a lot of the different meetings that were being held, and it's nice that even though it's been 3 years, that we've moved forward with having it. I love the fact that the website's going to be around for 10 years so that we can look at that. But I know I'm not going to have too much input, but I have to say this anyway. Community of interest can also be the unincorporated and incorporated. So, feel free to shut me off, Michelle, if I go too far. But like, for example, Chris is a farmer and Mina is urban. And so, we've got to kind of balance that. So in my opinion, anyway, when you're unincorporated, there's certain things that happen. And then when you're in the city limits, there's certain things that happen. But I'm going to say this anyway. I love my district, just hint, hint, hint. Okay, anyway.
So to piggyback on that too, the Board of Supervisors, when they chose to appoint their advisory committee, they did choose to also include members that lived in the unincorporated area to have those voices heard as well. So we're trying to cover all bases, but we're open to criticism. We're open to getting your feedback on the process as well. So please feel free to help us, and we'll certainly take all of that into consideration as we move forward with this process.
One question before, it would be helpful for me if there was an example of how communities of interest were looked at or established 10 years ago. So we could look at that as a place to start from. I have to admit, while I appreciate Sophia's trying to make it personal, I think the notion of somehow redistricting as it relates to people's interests in a park, in a particular park or not, it doesn't seem like that's what that's the methodology that we should be looking at when it comes to achieving the goals for districting. So I'd like to see what was done before to have some basis or understanding.
So I'll let the consultants respond to this, but I can tell you that I don't believe this was a criteria 10 years ago. This is new to the Fair Maps Act. And so, so this is new to all of us, including the consultants, as we start going through this process. But Sophia or Kimmy, did you want to respond?
Yes, yeah, as Michelle outlined, the Fair Maps Act is a new law passed. And this is the first time that it's being used for counties and cities. So moving forward, the counties and cities must look at communities of interest as a higher ranked criteria and about keeping them together. And just as a reminder, communities of interest, you don't need census data, you don't need American Community Survey to draw your communities of interest. The main reason why it is a higher ranked criteria is that we know that there are folks who, again, have different pockets and have different neighborhoods, have different ways that they define themselves. And this is the opportunity for them to do that. At the end of the day, it is up to the Board of Supervisors how they are going to intake the communities of interest, how they're going to look at that and evaluate it. But the big piece is to when you have the draft map plans, so when we get that census data, again, as we said, it's a more of an art than a science. So you can look at equal population, you can look at make sure that things are contiguous. And then if we hear through members of the public that one particular area of the county is being talked about, is being brought up, is being uplifted, then we can then look at the map plans, talk with the Board of Supervisors and see if it's possible to maintain a particular communities of interest. And then also if the board chooses to split one, then we have testimony and they can give a specific reason why they did that. Again, this is a ranked criteria and it will be one of the things that they considered. But again, as Michelle said, this wasn't as high of a consideration 10 years ago, and it is so this year under that new law.
And I think just to add to what Sophia was saying, is that the example that Supervisor Brown gave earlier about unincorporated versus incorporated, or a rural area versus an urban area, those could easily be communities of interest. And so if you have a rural area that's growing almonds, say, and that is a community of interest because their needs and what they see as, you know, critical information and a pathway to their supervisor area is going to be much different than if you're in the core of an urban area in a downtown area. So the communities of interest is really just to be able to give people voices in that arena to be able to express what's important to them and where those areas are. So now we have lots of hands up.
Oh, go ahead, Supervisor Brown.
So I just want to give an example. I live in Cordelia. So we're talking, I think 30 years ago, I think it was 2020, no, not 2020, 1990. I did not like the fact that 680, and this is before Costco. This is, well, there were still, you know, cows over there, guys, you know, where Costco is now and Nelda Monday and all of that. Where I live, you know, there housing development, but 680 cut us off. So I was not in the same assembly district that the rest of Fairfield was. I was in the assembly district with Valerie Brown. Not that I didn't like her, but it felt like we did not have a lot of input because, not to be rude, she had, you know, Vallejo and North County, right? So, you know, Lake and all of that. So I took the time, got out of school, and I drove to Sacramento and I went and spoke. And this was a long time ago. I'm not even sure who all the people were, but I said, it's not right that we are cut off from the city of Fairfield and we should be together. Now, granted, that's an assembly district, but it still meant we should be together. And to me, that's the example I'm giving in terms of a community of interest. Why were we cut off? Well, we were cut off because they needed enough people to balance. Well, that's not right. And I'm glad now that it is in the Fair Maps Act, but it worked out. We ended up being able to be with the rest of Fairfield when they did the redistricting. I'm not saying my words had any meaning, but to me, that's an example of a community of interest, is that you don't want to divide a community up. And then they do have, like Mina stated, then they have less togetherness to come and say to their elected officials, hey, what you're doing is not right. Does that make sense? But I just wanted to give that as an example of a community of interest. Don't divide up two sections, because then they don't have the power to come together and vote together in a block. I hope that makes sense.
All right, thank you, Supervisor. I see your hand up, Eric. Go ahead.
Oh, you're on mute.
Yeah, this is all about the money, how we're chopping up the pie. Traditionally, I think there's been a lot of geographical barriers, and that's where 680 was the cutting line that obviously divided Monica back in the day. But traditionally, there's been geographic regions which was on the other side of the hill, you were in a different group. So that's, and maps have been drawn, and there's been a lot of blood spilled over maps in the past. So going forward, these communities of interest, I'm a little curious as to defining what the communities of interest are. Is it just people of like mind, and that becomes a special interest? So we're all special interests. This is all about representation in government, is it not?
Yes.
Okay, and a lot of it's about cutting up the federal pie, because the federal pie is coming down. That's where all the money is going to get spent on the particulars for the, I guess you call them communities of interest, which is the school children and the traffic lights and the railroad and the barges and the trucks, the truck traffic, the almond farmer and his truck traffic, and the child riding a bicycle along the same lane that's being used by the truck traffic. So all these communities of interest, they all have to coexist together, and it's just really important that we get this lined up correctly. So there's a lot to play here, and there's a lot of different interests here. So I'm kind of curious about these communities of interest and how a lot of drawing of maps, and that's kind of gerrymandering is we've had a lot of gerrymandering in this country and that's how we do it. That's how we do it here. So yeah, I'm getting off on a tangent. So yeah, it's just about the money, I suppose, and the communities of interest. Traditional boundaries of railroad tracks and hillsides and rivers, obviously, is keeping groups together within a block. So this comes with the census tracts, I guess, and then it also comes down to voting districts or voting precincts. The precincts overlay on all this. The precincts, and then those go with the zip codes too. So are they incorporating, are they going to overlay zip codes and precinct maps on top of each other, and then the legislative district, and for the House and the Senate, and then for the Assembly, and for it all seems a big pie, a big wedding cake, so to speak. So anyway, I'll stop now. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your input. Is there anyone else that still had any questions before we close out? Oh, go ahead, Marianne.
I was just thinking, I'm thinking something like food pantries and soup kitchens would be communities of interest, because you need to maintain access to those areas. People tend to be repetitive, go the same day of the week, go for the same meal, like on a Tuesday lunch or a Friday dinner. And I'm wondering that it seems like it could almost, each food pantry or soup kitchen could be a community of interest by itself, but also they interrelate, because if one is closed off, that means the demand may increase at another. And I'm just wondering if there's a way of doing both, having them as individual communities of interest, and then some kind of joint community of interest, because they're very interrelated and serving the same population.
I know that Michelle has been doing a significant amount of outreach to the county, to folks in the county rather. And so I think that if there are community-based organizations that have those interests, I'm sure that they have at this point received an email from Michelle, because I know she sent out a whole bunch. But and so that is one of the pieces of this, is to encourage those groups to come forward and discuss those things. I think that they are critical, social services to the community. And I think we've all seen that within the last year and a half or so, more than maybe we would have otherwise. So I would encourage you that if there is a community-based organization or a series of them that work together, that they should absolutely attend one of these meetings or reach out to Michelle directly. And we are happy to take all of that input and all of the input from, any resident really within the county.
And then I think also maybe, Sophia, you can speak to this, but, I think we can all recognize that we have some sort of community and there's familiarity of some sort. But there is those 3 criteria by which you have to measure those community of interest by. And Sophia went over them, but I recognize that you can also go over them really fast. So, you could have missed that, but they, at the end of the day, you have to weigh what your community of interest is up against those 3 criteria to see if it impacts from a redistricting standpoint. And we'll help the community through this process as they submit this information to us. We'll be looking at whether it meets that criteria, and that'll be part of the report that goes to the board.
Michelle, would you mind if I comment a little bit?
Oh, absolutely. Go ahead.
Hi, everybody. Bernadette Curry, County Council. I just thought it would be important that we talk about the task of the whole redistricting process is to divide up Solano County into 5 as equal as possible pieces of that pie. And so we're trying, so as was stated before, there's a new law, the Fair Maps Act, that guides the process. So before there was general guidelines, but there were not specific priorities. So the first specific priority is that the piece of the pie, the 5 pieces of pie, be as equal as possible, but that they be geographically as contiguous as possible. So going back to the comment that was made about gerrymandering, is that this new law requires the board to consider and be first and foremost, be as compact as possible, look as fair and transparent as possible. The second one, once they do that, so you can't go along just I-80 corridor and say that's one district. It has to be, divided up properly. The next one then, after we do the geographically compact, then we get to this community of interest. And that's where the community input comes in. And community of interest is, as you're drawing those maps, or you're taking the county pie and you're dividing it up into 5 as equal possible slices as possible, you think about what communities, what areas, what homeowners, what businesses all make sense together. And so that includes, as was stated before, I thought that was a great one with regards to the dog park, a group of people that all use a similar public facility that they can come in. So that could be a lifestyle choice. It could be agricultural, that we have. Agricultural is a community of interest, so our farming area, or Vallejo being a far more urban, less agricultural. That would be a community of interest. Demographics, political subdivision was mentioned before, something like a school district. So it doesn't make sense to go right through Vallejo and go half to one district supervisor and half to another, unless there's some, again, going back to the whole pie, the pie has to be equal slices. So think about it in terms of geographical and how we then draw those pieces of community interest together. If that makes hope that helps the discussion.
Thank you, Bernadette. Mina, I saw you had your hand up, and then following that is Eric. Go ahead, Mina.
Yes, I totally agree with Bernadette. I think that we have to look at this. I think the mistake was to start looking at community of interest instead of looking at the whole pie, as the gentleman, Mr. Murphy said. So basically, I want to give an example too. Now that we have in Vallejo the districts that we have, South Vallejo is right next to Glen Cove, which is my district. Glen Cove, Somerset, up on the hill. Okay. Glen Cove does not have any of the same needs that South Vallejo has. South Vallejo, one, is a food desert. They don't have any grocery stores. They have a lot of renters. They have a lot of issues that my district doesn't have. I don't have hardly any businesses over here. Property values are much higher in my district. So the needs of the two groups of people, and there's other districts, but I'm going to use those two, are very different. So when we were looking at how to draw the map, if we would have combined South Vallejo with Glen Cove would have eaten South Vallejo whole, because one, we already had council members that had lived out in the area of East Vallejo, and the needs that South Vallejo had wanted, the needs had not been addressed. The other thing is that when you have representation of people that live in that district, you're going to have more pride. You're going to be able to contact them faster. I'll give you an example. I'm not in District 6, which is South Vallejo, but we have some discretionary funds that we just received, and I'm using it to provide a farmer's market that's going to start mid-July through September in South Vallejo. So that's what district does. You get small groups with a caring supervisor or a caring council member or a caring whatever, the needs are met. And people are really, really liking this because they're able to, one, contact their representative immediately and have them call back. And at the same time, feel like they're part of something. You know, Vallejo is no different than Vacaville or Fairfield, yet because our strip of the county, you know, is so long, we feel like we're different worlds, like, oh, Vacaville people, oh yeah, Vallejo folks, they're this, they're no, we're the same county and we all have to work together. And sometimes we might not agree on the special interest that's important to someone. The bottom line is we're all here to speak what is important to us, and that's what this whole process is. And that's why it came about, because there was people that were not being represented. There were voices that were not being heard. You know, some folks had the connections and were always able to make things happen. And then there were potholes in different areas, and different areas that had the, you know, the ones that were being listened to didn't have the potholes, you know, had the grocery stores versus a food desert. So it's a very, you know, not equitable way that the city of Vallejo and the county works. Now, when they said farmers, the farming district has a way different needs than what we would have over here. So we have to respect what their needs are, and they have to be divided in a way that is, one, equitable as far as the population, that the needs of people are considered, that these special interest groups, sometimes you're not going to get what you want because we can't cookie cut it that much. I had suggested 8 districts in Vallejo, and we couldn't do that. We would have to change the charter. 8 districts would have worked for us more because it would have narrowed it down to special interest even more. Unfortunately, we had to stay at 6. So we're not all going to get what we want, but I think that working together we'll get closer and better than what it is. And I'll say this last thing. In Vallejo, the numbers that they gave us just yesterday at the city council meeting, we were able to see that 3 districts grew by about 1,500, 1,800 people. My district barely grew. So what's going to happen, and probably in your, you know, in the county as well, is lines are just going to have to be, you know, slide over the line briefly. We're not going to have to take, I don't know, my district, I'll use that, you know, take what Monica has and all of a sudden divide it and give it to somebody else, because it doesn't make sense. The numbers haven't changed that much. You just move the line over, give a supervisor a little bit more, or take a supervisor a little bit less, and leave it as it is. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, go ahead, Eric. You're still on mute.
Now knowing that there's 5 pieces of the pie, these pieces of the pie all need to be a diversified portfolio of people in the county, or in our lovely little town of Vallejo, our little city here. So those 5 districts, or 5 pieces of the pie, we want to try to make them as equitable as possible, I see. And we do have the different competing interests of the sideshow folks versus law and order versus people that are raising their families and children and schooling and all that stuff. So these communities of interest is going to be very interesting to see how we're going to put this up. And some people need to participate. If they don't participate, they'll be left behind. And unfortunately, that's the way things are going to fall. And that's the way they have in the past. People will get frustrated with it because they deal with public officials are not listening to the population. As has been stated, that some of the elected officials live on the hillsides and have a very nice view of the western face in the evening, whereas the people down in the lowlands, in the flatlands, in the floodplains don't have that luxury, and they get swamp gas and they get all the bugs and everything else that goes with it. And that's unfortunate. So mobility is available to anybody if they want to do it, and that's the thing. But you also have to be an active participant to make sure that the trash gets picked up and the potholes are filled, traffic lights work. So there's a lot we need to get done, and we do need to reach the people that do not speak English as their first tongue. It's their second tongue, or they don't speak it very well. That's fine. Welcome, you're here. This is how we do it here. Bring what you got, add to it. But we all work together and coalesce to make this thing all work. So that's what I've got, I guess, right now. But there's a lot of competing interests, because we do have the water port, we have an ocean port, we have railroad, we have trucks, we have buses, we even have an airport. Napa, we have
Vacaville, Nut Tree.
The Nut Tree is an airport. There's a lot of small airports. They can be used because, that federal money can come in to build that airport, make sure the airport's good, so we can charter a small little airplane so people can take vacations and go small places. Anyway, there's a lot.
Michelle, I really need to clarify something that you said, Mr. Murphy.
Go ahead.
Correct me. Districts are not going to be exactly similar. And so that's the whole point of the conversation of communities of interest. They're going to be as closely sized and population. So roughly we have 446,000, I think. So divided by 5, however, 446,000, which was the last census in terms of the overall population.
That's population density then.
Right, and that's
exactly
number one. So under the Federal Voting Act, these 5 districts have to be as close as population as possible. So once you do that, box number 1. Let me finish. Number 2 is then geographically compact. And so to say that you're going to have a district that is going to be similar in North County in terms of Dixon, which has, wide swath of open space, farming around it, compared to what is in Vallejo, you're going to have 2 completely different districts. And that's where the conversation of the community of interest comes in. How do you carve up to keep those communities? I'm going to stick with farming because I think that's easiest to understand. How do you carve that up to make it as compact as possible with the same number of people as in Vallejo, right? So obviously right now, District 5 is our majority of our ag area out towards Rio Vista. District 4 currently is North Vacaville. How do you carve those up to make them as geographically contiguous, as well as keeping those neighborhoods together, right? So, I think, Mina, I thought that was a great description of the difference between Glen Cove versus South Vallejo. That is an excellent example of keeping the interests and the needs of Glen Cove so that when they need to lobby their council member, they're all talking about the same thing. Going back to the argument with regards to the dog park, they're lobbying the same supervisor to provide whatever. Currently, I'm trying to think of what's in District 2, waterfront along Benicia. That would be, talking about maybe possibly even, refineries. That might be a community of interest. People who are affected by the refinery and live in close proximity, you would keep that particular area contiguous, right? People are not necessarily worried about a refinery living up in Dixon. They may be worried about farming. They may be worried, about crop dusting. I don't know what it might be, but that's the point in the conversation of communities of interest, is how you bring input in with regards to your communities. That's the feedback we're looking for.
Thank you, Benedict. Okay, so Brenda, you're up next.
Okay, thank you. And my picture stays for this meeting. But my question is, I'm wondering, what is the economic impact or determinant to districting? Where does that come into play?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Well, it sounds like, are there more funds in certain areas because of what? Is that a determinant, or so are there some economic impacts to how districts are drawn, et cetera?
No, no, the board of supervisors. So as was stated, by law, there are 5 supervisors. And so the whole point is the county may get more money depending on how we lobby a particular congressperson or senator or whatever. But it's the different districts are not, they don't get more money versus another district. District 2 doesn't get more money compared to District 3. It may have a different project. So again, District 2, I'm thinking of, an unincorporated area, Tri-Valley open space. So that may get more money than, say, Vallejo for open space, because you don't have, the city of Vallejo doesn't have the open space, that type of thing. So parks may go into one particular area and therefore get more funding from the county as opposed to the other, but that goes to what has unincorporated area versus incorporated area.
Well, thank you for clarifying that.
Okay, Stephen, your hand's up.
Thank you. Is there an expectation, and I'm not sure if Monica, if you brought it up, but the existing district boundaries are what they are. Is the expectation is that those will stay relatively the same, and we're going to move things around at the margins, or is this an opportunity perhaps to completely redo how the district boundaries have been set up and maybe make things more homogeneous in terms of ag versus urban or waterfront versus inland, that sort of thing. I'm really still struggling to try to figure out what it is we're supposed to be doing as this committee and what the goal is.
Okay, so I think that the implementation of the Fair Maps Act and the requirement to relook at these communities of interest is an opportunity to look at how the district lines are drawn. And I think that that's what we're going to see come out of this. We're going to see the input that we get and the maps that get drawn, that get submitted, may or may not change the existing boundary lines as we see them. So I think that this exercise of figuring out what are communities of interest that will get impacted by the way a district line is drawn will sort of dictate where the lines might need to go, and they may or may not change at this point. So I think this is all part of the discovery as we go through this process. There's no foregone conclusion of what this should or shouldn't be at this point. Did that help you, Stephen?
It does. It does. And I'm still, maybe I'm just having a difficulty and others aren't. But as we sit down then as the committee members and attempt to draw things and come up with a plan, or here's a vision or a plan of why District 4 should be where it is versus how it was. I guess, what's the rank priority? What's the first? I understand having the 5 districts be equal, relatively equal in size. Okay, but then that's just one measure. It doesn't really prioritize what we look at when we're creating the boundary. So being contiguous, okay, well, that doesn't really prioritize what then constitutes the interests in that district. So is it something that we're looking at, like the city of Vacaville shouldn't be split in half by I-80? it should just be all encompassed within a district. The city, or maybe that's the same for each urban area, right? Each urban area should be within its own district. So that's the priority. Then we just sort of smatter around the rural and agricultural, populations around each urban area, and they become part of that district. I'm just trying to get a sense of if there's a prioritization of what we should be looking at.
Michelle, just real fast to Stephen, when you talked about size, are you talking about population size or you're talking about geographic size?
Population size, because I think that's the only criteria.
It is. I just, when you, in the context, I just needed a clarification. So,
Sure.
But you can create
Thanks,
anything you want, Stephen. So anyway.
Yes. So, Stephen, I don't know if this will help you. The good news is you don't have to come up with what that is as the committee. The committee right now is tasked with determining where the communities of interest lie, and that information will be taken forward to the Board of Supervisors at the end of September. Just remember, at that point, we have not received the data from the U.S. Census Bureau. So drawing maps wouldn't be something you would be doing as part of this committee right now. What we need the committee to do is to help us identify the communities of interest within each of these districts. And that's why we're having by-district meetings. And then once we have that information, that will go forward as a report to the Board of Supervisors. And they will use that information when they start looking at how the maps can or cannot be drawn, using that information. At that point, as a community member, you can certainly submit your own idea of what you feel a map should look like using the online tool that Sophie demonstrated for you tonight. So starting to think about what the district should look like, I think is getting a little bit ahead of what we're trying to achieve right now in getting information to the board members to help them make more informed decisions when they start looking at the boundaries.
Actually, that's probably the most helpful thing I've heard so far. That's redefine what it is we're supposed to be doing now.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, Stephen, I would just add to that. I mean, I think you raised a good point you mentioned in terms of waterfront. If you said, I think there's a community of interest of people who live along any type of waterway, and you draw the map to say it's this swath of area. And so it's everybody on the Vallejo waterfront, Benicia, along up to Rio Vista. I mean, so if you start saying that somebody who lives adjacent to water is a community of interest, that's one thing. If again, farming is quite easy. Another one would be if you live on the wildland urban interface and you live in a ridge and therefore a fire prone area, that could be another community of interest. But I think you're starting to get it in terms of what we're talking about is where are people living, and how then would they be most aligned to reach out to their supervisor to talk about the issues that the Board of Supervisors will be dealing with.
Okay, is there any more questions, or can we answer anything else for anyone?
It looks like this. So this is about the population density, and that goes to the zoning, I guess, and the way things are set up. So obviously the urban areas, there's more people stacked on top of each other than there are out in the suburbs and out in the rural parts where they have a ranch with large land. So, and the projects that are used, special projects that are used in one part of the district versus another part of the district, everybody within the county gets to use that facility because it is a public facility being used by public funds. So a park like Lynch Canyon, open space, whatever. So we're trying to chop up this map by the population density, which goes to the zoning, as if it's registered R1, R2, R3, depending. I know there's been discussion about people saying, oh, well, we just want to have a little in-law apartment. Well, that's going to put a bigger burden 7 years down the line when that family or those groups of individuals living there, habitating there, then expand and demand more services. So versus somebody, somebody in the ranch out in the rural part of town, part of the county put up a barracks for their labor. And then they demand more service because there's then the population increase there in the next 10 years. So we're looking 10 years down the line. So the zoning is important that we enforce that zoning, saying, hey, for 10 years, you know, we're only going to have 5 people here or 6 people here, but that is obviously subject to change as more people, life changes. Things in your life change. You got to change with the times, as it were. So with the population density, that's what we're looking at, right? It's figuring out within that population density, then those groups of people in those denser areas or spread out, their interests are as far as it's a NIMBYs, not in my backyard. I don't care. It's a refinery. I don't live near the refinery. I don't care. But those that live near the refinery, they do care about it. It provides work for a lot of people that are within the county, countywide, go work there. So that's part of the density. They don't want to live close to the refinery, so they live outside, but they commute in. So 10 years down the line, the corridor for traffic, however it's going to be, if it's going to be remote traffic or remote buses like they have down in San Ramon, that's something that this 10-year plan is going to look at, how we're going to do that. So that's what the density I gather. So that was going to be the community of interest, I suppose, is the transit is part of it. And that's it for now. Thank you.
I think I'll like to just sort of remind folks that there's a couple of different ways that the maps could be drawn. And this was referenced in a previous presentation given by Paul Mitchell, our president, is when we do get that census data, you know, in the fall, the Board of Supervisors will direct us to create map plans, and that can be done in 3 different ways. One of them is to uplift a community plan that was submitted via a placemat or submitted using District R. So they could say, look at the community maps and uplift them. Another way is to ask us to review the community of interest testimony and then create 3 draft maps based on that. And the third one would be a live line drawing where we are at a Board of Supervisors meeting live and members of the public will be able to see if we take in one block group or take in another. And so I know we don't have any draft map plans right now, and so it seems a little bit abstract, but those sort of conversations will happen in the fall when we do get the data. And just as a reminder, what Michelle has said and Bernadette has said as well, the main purpose we're here right now is to gather testimony from members of the public, and that can come in any different format via the form, using District R, using the placemat, calling in to give testimony, and then we can use that when we do draw the map plan. So we are not allowed, under the Fair Maps Act, we're not allowed to draw any draft map plans until 21 days after the census data has been released. And then that is there in place to allow for members of the public or other community groups to look at that data and create plans before the board and the consultant team. So I think when we finally get that data, when we know exactly what will the divide up between the 5 districts be, then there's going to be different testimony when the maps are drawn. So I just want to reiterate that we're here for community testimony, and that can come in any form, and then we will look at that as a criteria when we're drawing those plans. And so there's been a lot of different varieties of data points and neighborhoods that have been discussed today. And as Kimmy and the team has mentioned, you know, we want to hear from those folks. So as members of the commission, if you know people who are in those pockets of districts, please share this link, please share those forms, and we'd love to hear from them. It's a wonderful variety of commission, 15 folks. That's fantastic. And so we know that you all have connections in the community, and this is the second of many presentations. So hopefully that we'll get more folks from the public to come on. And this has been really great feedback, so we can think through the way that we'll go over this concept of communities of interest in the coming hearings. So.
And then also just when we get to that point later in the fall, when maps are starting to be drawn and they will go to the Board of Supervisors, those will be open public meetings. So you will be able to testify on those maps. You'll be able to raise any concerns you might have. These are all open meetings, including the Board of Supervisors meetings, until the day that the maps get approved by the Board of Supervisors. So there's a lot of opportunity for you to be involved in the process. Okay. Any other questions? All right, I'm seeing none. Thank you all for attending. This was very informative, and I hope you've learned a lot, and we hope you will provide some input via our website on that form. That'll be helpful to us to help put for the advisory committee to help put their report together. So thank you, everyone, and have a good rest of your evening. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Good
You're
night.
welcome.